Anything you can be, I can be greater. Sooner or later, I'm greater than you.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I can shoot a partridge with a single cartridge.
I can get a sparrow with a bow and arrow.
I can live on bread and cheese.
And only on that?
Yep.
Sucking a rat.
Any note you can sing, I can sing higher.
I can sing any note higher than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
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 This is Dr. Ed Park from Recharge Biomedical, and we're doing a webinar today on twins. And we're going to be joined by these gentlemen, Bill and Ben Harris. The topic of twins brings up an interesting question. Everyone knows that there's fraternal twins, which are two different sperm, so you can have boy-girl twins. They're just different people born at the same time. Whereas identical twins are monozygotic. They come from one egg, and depending on what stage at which it splits, you can get a late cleavage, a late splitting at day 13 to 15, about 2 weeks, you'll get Siamese or conjoined twins. If it cleaves earlier, there's just different numbers of bags the twins are in. And probably the most common is this, cleavage around a week. You get 2 bags and then 1 big bag in which they reside. This really is at the heart of what we're talking about, genes. So as everybody knows, we have 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 from dad. And it's a long code. It can go G, C, A, T. And so it's just literally like a typed message from end to end, and there are 23 of these. And so the interesting thing is that, and of course Watson and Crick won the Nobel Prize in the 50s for discovering this, is that the C always binds to a G and the A binds to a T. So if you have one half of the code, you have the other half of the code as well. And this is a kind of a clever thing that all life on Earth uses. The cell cycle is important. These little bow ties are what we normally think of what chromosomes look like, these big X's, right? So one half is from mom and one half is this is both from mom or dad, and it's just copied. So it's interesting to note that when the cell is functioning in G1, there's only one copy of mom's and one copy of dad's. If there's a problem with the genetics, which we go into in I think some of the podcasts earlier, number 4 and 5, then this enzyme, the Watchman P53, will keep the cell from dividing. So I think that some of our dysfunctional cells are because we're arrested in development. So S phase is synthesis. That's when the single gets doubled in preparation for splitting. So the G2 phase, there's duplicate copies, both of mom's and dad's chromosomes. So M allows them to be divided mitotically into 2 different cells, and then, again, most cells are functioning with a single copy from each parent. It's important that we understand that up until about 15 years ago, everyone thought the genes were everything. They used to not really realize that all the so-called junk RNA or junk DNA, all the stuff in between was really, some of it was very functional as well. And so what you need to understand is the scale of what we're talking about. Here's the AGCT, the double helix. Double helix, I think it's like 146 base pairs are wrapped around this little histone, and this unit is called a nucleosome. It's like a little spool. Spools are packed together tightly, like beads, and then the beads are further packed in and condensed only during M phase, mitotic phase. So there's really very rarely that the whole thing is packaged and ready to go. Actually, during G1, the chromosomes are all unwound like big clouds. And so what's in the cloud? Well, based on something called epigenetic modification is what the cell is. So here, let's talk about cell differentiation. I know this is very technical, but it will become important shortly. Traditionally, the model was, here's the embryo, and you have these layers. The outer layer of this little primitive thing is going to become neurons and skin cells. There's this privileged space, which is the germ cells, the sperm and eggs, which live generation after generation, largely because of telomerase activity and faithful error correction. The inside layer becomes things like lungs, thyroid, pancreas, and the middle layer becomes the muscle, blood cells, some of the kidney, etc. So the thing not true in some animals, like amphibians that can regrow tails and things, basically, unless you're talking about aberrant process, cellular differentiation in us is kind of one-directional. So here's like, let's say this is the one egg that Bill and Ben came out of. So here, there's Bill and there's Ben. Now, as Bill became more differentiated, you got the different layers, and the layers can only become certain types of cells. So the process is kind of unidirectional. Things get more differentiated, more specialized, and at every waypoint there's probably a cell that can continue to reproduce itself, and then something more differentiated. And these are called stem cells, and I would refer you to podcast 5 to understand that. So in my model of aging, the way I think about it is that these stem cells are like queen bees, and actually queen bees live several years, whereas the drones around her are clones, and they live months. Same with organs. The liver might have hundreds of these. I'm not sure what the number is, but there's one critical cell, and around her are her copies, and so as she accumulates errors in both her DNA and also maybe in her epigenetic modifications, all these little drones will only be as good or as young as the most recent ancestor. One thing that kind of rubs against this model of 3 layers is this cell called the mesenchymal stem cell, and we go into that in terms of podcast 6 and 7 when we talk about how joints regenerate in bones. And I didn't know this, but it turns out that there are these wandering itinerant queen bees. They're called mesenchymal stem cells, and they have the ability to differentiate into all 3 layers, neurons, mesodermal, and endodermal. So when something dies in your body and this queen bee is killed, these will come in, and depending on the environment, the milieu that they land in, these can become anything. They can become cartilage if they land in a stem cell niche that's been recently destroyed by whatever process, and this happens, I think, in TA65. So what will happen, people get arthritis, and they'll get an ache, and that's just the destruction of these dysfunctional cells, these cells that are, let's say, arrested here by P53. And then, hopefully what happens, if you have good mesenchymal stem cells, they'll come in, and you'll create a brand new queen bee for that little niche. All right, so backing up, let's talk about what is the good metaphor. I like a good analogy, everyone knows. So the old Darwinian or Watson-Crick model or Mendelian is every cell is the same. It has the same DNA, and the hardware, the membranes and the little organelles are all the same. So what really determines the function is something more Lamarckian. And Lamarck was a guy who thought that, if your parents were smart and learned, then you would learn, or if you worked out, and then your kids would be strong. But all this, there's 2 kinds of Lamarckianism, which is the cells learn intergenerationally, which is controversial. But also, as we go through life, we know if you use it, you lose it, or if you don't use it, etc. So the real key is not the hardware, it's what you load on. It's the operating system. And the operating system is the way that the DNA, which has I'm going to say 15,000 different genes and God knows how many so-called junk RNA modulators. How it's controlled is what we call cell differentiation, and that's really a function of gene expression and these epigenetic marks. So just hold on tight. We'll figure out what that means. So here's our double helix represented here, and remember we had these little spools with 146 base pairs. So this nucleosome is usually packed tightly. Now, if you want it to be like, let's say, a nerve cell or a liver cell, there are certain genes that need to be expressed for that to function in that way. And genes are, as you know, sequences of DNA that code for usually a protein product. But there are transcription modifications that make it more, combined with proteins and what have you. And RNAs, now we're finding out, have a lot to do with modulating that. But what happens is you'll go ahead and hit these little tails here, these little signalers, and the spools will unwind enough for this gene to be expressed. So the vast majority of genes are tightly packed, inaccessible for expression. But depending on what kind of function you need from that cell, that will be bequeathed. In other words, the stem cell will make all her drones with the same pattern of epigenetic expression. So all the genes you need to be a neuron are kind of somehow magically, and people don't know how, bequeathed to the future generations. So getting back to twins, you'd think the identical twins would be identical, but not so. From the minute that they split, they start to copy their DNA billions and trillions of times. And of course, if you've ever copied a photocopy of a photocopy, you realize that over time there's degradation, there's blurring and spots and speckles and rotation. Same with most cells, including stem cells, and I believe that's why we age. The germ cells, whereas the sperm and egg are almost perfect in terms of their error correction and in terms of their longevity. So they survive generation after generation, which is important. Otherwise, every generation would be inferior, diseased, and older. So this is a good model to keep in mind. So what happens, your stem cells are doing the best they can, and it's highly efficient. I'm not sure how you compare it to computers, but the error correction is high. And what's better is there's a redundancy. So if you can kill off that cell with p53, then a fresh mesenchymal will usually come in and replace it. So I think it's known fairly well by people who know identical twins that their birthmarks are different, and because birthmarks have to do with the journey of all these cells as the fetus develops. So that's different. And also brain development is different. Personality, rarely that similar, even though you would think with the same genes in a nature versus nurture controversy that personalities would be same. And perhaps to the outside they are similar, but to identical twins they always feel like they're completely different individuals, strangely. Dr. Janoff is a psychiatrist who is tuned in, and he is publishing a book called Life Before Birth. And in it, he discusses a lot of the important changes, epigenetic changes that occur in the in utero environment. And this can be in response to stress, and that was well known, for the Polish or the Warsaw wartime deprivation, Stalingrad babies. But also emotional stress, also even food preferences. Everything that's going through the mom in terms of the emotional state has a way of imprinting, and not necessarily in the classical imprinting sense, but it messes with the baby, it changes the baby, which is not to put a guilt trip on the mom, but it's just to say that we're just starting to understand that it's not the PC that matters, it's the operating system. And certainly the milieu and the way that the cells are damaged or functioning is important in that person. We talk telomeres a lot, and we're born with 10,000, but did you know that we're conceived with 15,000? And in mice, these numbers can be 10 times as much, by the way. But for humans, like a pinball machine starting a new game, everything is reset. It's not handed down, it's reset literally. So, and that was a study by Blasco recently. So there's an early stage where all the telomeres are lengthened to a set number, like 15,000. And the cells copy so much to make a baby in that 9 months or 10 months that you've burned through 5,000 already. So you're born with only 10,000. And when you die, the number's somewhere around 3,000 usually before the aging stem cells kill you. And again, if it's not one thing, it's another. So let's talk about Bill and Ben Harris, these two little whippersnappers. Interestingly, here's them at 3, and they look very similar. I think we would agree, identical twins. And here's at 4, so cute. Although I think Ben is already starting to get a little taller. And here's 5, so kind of Inspector Marlowe, nice little Sunday get-up here, very cute. This chart is meant to indicate that, of course, the hardwiring, the motor development happens in utero, but the majority of the growth of the brain and the circuitry and the logical circuits and the schema happens in the first 3-4 years of life. So the rate-limiting step is really probably the female pelvis. I mean, the head bones are soft and the pelvis is soft, and you can only get so smart a primate out through those hips. So a lot of the growth and complexity has to be programmed afterwards. So speech, of course, 0 through 3, emotions, logic, social skills, peer skills a little later, pre-K, language. So as the seasons turn for these gentlemen, the identical twins, of course, I think this is probably around 20 years old. You can see, I think, Ben's face getting a little more narrow, and Bill a little rounder. I'm going to guess here that this is Ben and that's Bill. Here is the wonderful leisure suit days with the mustache and the 70s haircut gentleman back here. So 75. This is 42. And again, I'm going to cheat and say the tall guy is Ben and that's Bill. And that's Dad, I believe. Proud Daddy. Interestingly, they said they always looked older than their stated age, and I think that they are 46 here, I'm going to say. So, again, Ben, the taller one, Bill here, Ben and Bill. And this is when they're 56 years old. So Bill came in. He's known a lot about aging and the players in this story with Jaron and West and Andrew. So he's really been watching from afar. But finally he decided to take a chance, I'm going to say 5-6 months ago. He came in to see us. And at that time, this is what he looked like. And so about 3.5 months later, and that's what this webinar is based on. So his weight went from 222 to the same. And I should preface this by saying that Bill's health is a little bit better than Ben's. Ben has acquired some of the diseases of aging in a more severe fashion, which we'll go into. But Bill's blood pressure was 132/90, taking meds, and it went down to 117/74. Heart rate went down from 77 to 66, which is a representation of how efficient the heart is circulating the blood in the arteries. The skin really took a bump up from 30s to 40, about 40 average. These are measurements of electrical impedance, which implies skin thickness. And we got 50% jumps here up into the 60s, which is interesting. And that's just an electrical measurement. And I think you'll see that in the video that we'll play in a little bit. So his eyes also improved, but not dramatically. Whereas his brother, I think the change was pretty dramatic. Most interesting was his blood pressure improvement, which, his blood pressure was about the same, although corrected, it got lower with meds. Ben is this gentleman, and his weight, interestingly, went up 9 pounds. So that's a pretty big jump. And so I think he would tell you that he was a little too light for his weight, and so that was a welcome change for him. His pulse went down quite a bit, 20 points, which means that his circulation was much improved. And then his vision was, and he talks about that if I can ever find the video. This is a measurement of the right eye and the left eye. OD is right. And so he went from 0 to 3 there. And on the left eye, 6 to 8, and then 3 to 7. So these are pretty significant changes for him. The arterial compliance somewhat improved, but really not much to write home about. Although this number is important. The SEVR is the end diastolic ratio, and it tells you how much oxygen capacity the heart and the circulation has in resting phase, if diastole, and it's quite good. So we're looking at the changes that these gentlemen have. I think the general appearance you'll see in the video is much better with Bill. And also, Bill talks about the metabolic changes that his concierge doctor noted. They've both been noticing improvement in their glucose tolerance as well. Ben gained the weight. His vision improved, as we discussed. Neuropathy for Bill improved, but not so much for Ben. But that was at 14 weeks. We'll talk to them shortly. Ben's gout improved despite self-discontinuing the allopurinol. And Bill's trainer has noticed greatly improved flexibility. One thing of very great interest is the dreaming. And usually the dreaming can improve. But Bill had said he hadn't dreamed for years. And then about 3-month mark, he did start dreaming again. And for Ben, who has a different physiology, about 4 months, he started resuming the dream state. The chances of being an identical twin are 1 in 10,000. So if you multiply 1 in 10,000 by 1 in 10,000, you have 1 in 100,000. And that was the likelihood of these identical twins coming from Bill's marriage. So we have Mary and we have Carol, and they are identical twins as well. So that's really interesting. We have 1 in 100,000, and that was the likelihood of these identical twins coming from Bill's marriage. So we have Mary and we have Carol, and they are identical twins as well. So that's really interesting. The reason why they're involved is that Bill was feeling good, so he gave a bottle to Mary's Rottweiler, Z, who has been quite sick with joint problems and kidney failure from some kind of food poisoning with grapes. So Z has done really well in terms of his functional capacity and his mood and his coat, so we might hear about that. So why don't we go ahead and get Bill and Ben on. I'm going to unmute you, gentlemen. And I have to look for the video anyway, so that will take me a second. So, Bill, Ben, are you guys on?
Yeah, we're on.
Fabulous. Were you able to hear the webinar all right?
I did very well.
Yeah, I did too.
Now, I can't tell by the voices who's who, so.
Okay. Well, this is Ben.
Okay. All right, so what did you think of the pictures, the walk down memory lane?
I thought they were great. Yeah.
Like
I noticed Ben got in the hippie deal for a while with the mustache.
I saw
that was the 70s.
That was pretty groovy.
Now that picture on up in the left-hand corner that you have of us.
Yeah.
No, not that one. That one right there.
The orchard.
That was at your college, and we dressed up like that for something like Tramp Day or something like that. So we didn't really go to college looking like that. We were 19 years old when that was taken.
Well, I mean, there's one headshot. Were you a movie star? I didn't put that up there. Maybe I'll put it in the archive where it says "With Love, Bill." But you look like a movie star there.
Yeah, well, I was trying to look like somebody. I don't know. I don't remember who it was at the time, but yeah, I did
like
that.
Montgomery Clift or something like that. It's quite a. One thing that's interesting, you guys always say your personality is different. Can one of you or both of you explain how your personality has been different?
Well, Ben, you want to explain it, and then I'll give my take on it.
I guess over time I've been more serious. He's been a little more outgoing. I think that's basically simple.
Yeah, that pretty well encapsulates it. Yeah, I've been more physical and outgoing, and Ben's been a more serious type guy.
And was that as long as you can remember it was like that?
I think it's always been that way. Ben is I would say he's come out and been a lot more physical the last 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
Interesting. And did you guys when did Ben start getting taller? It looked like it was fairly early on, like 3
I think
or
it
4.
started relatively early on, and actually coming out of the hatch. They didn't know I was there. Strangely enough, we were born on the dining room table in Nampa, Idaho, and the doctor, they just thought there was one of them coming in 15 minutes later.
I love that.
I came out,
and
I weighed a little more at birth, so I don't know if it started probably relatively early.
So,
and our
who
mother's
was the older twin?
I'm the oldest. This is Bill. I was the oldest, and Mother's only comment was, "Is it going to cost more?" Because they were charging $35. We had 2 doctors, and they said, "Yeah, it'll be $50 for 2 of them." And
Why
then
not? Double it up.
Yeah, and to show you the depression we were in, Dad and his brothers had purchased an old ice house, and they'd torn all the lumber out, and Dad had some of the lumber in our backyard. And 5 years later, he gave the doctor some of that lumber to pay for the $50.
Oh my God! Still paying in lumber.
Yeah, we used to play around on that lumber pile, and then we lost it.
So this is outstanding. You guys look quite dapper here. This would be when you're about 30-ish.
The bottom level there, yeah, somewhere around 30.
Outstanding. So now you had 7 kids, right, Bill?
Yeah, I have 7 kids now. 5 from my first marriage, and then Harriet had 2, and we have 7 together.
That's fabulous. And Ben, how many kids do you have?
We have 6 together, 3 and 3.
Wow. So you've contributed to the gene pool.
Yeah, we do our best.
Yeah. So now, I know you guys are both, you like to crack jokes. You're really funny. Did you always like the same kind of girl? And if so, may I ask, did the girls,
No,
which
we
one did the
didn't.
girls
Actually,
like more?
We're actually completely opposite. We were attracted to the completely opposite type of gal.
Really?
Yeah, Ben was attracted to the outgoing type, and I was attracted to the kind of meek type, and went on from there.
So, opposites attract, huh?
Yeah, that's how it was.
Interesting. Now, turning to the TA65, that was only at 14 weeks. It's been almost 6 months now. How's the neuropathy for you gentlemen?
Well,
this is
Bill. Mine is better, and I'm sleeping a lot better. How about you, Benny?
My long-range vision has been much better. However, it showed up a little. I guess my vision showed up a little in the test. I've noticed that my fasting glucose has gone down about 10 to 15 points in the morning.
Wow.
I'm in the 80s almost 100% of the time.
Are you still taking the metformin or the glucophage?
I am, but this has been. I think a lot of this can be contributed to the medications we're taking. The T6. Cool. And how about your blood pressure requirement, Bill? Has the pills gone down at all?
My blood pressure is last I had it was 103/62.
Okay, so probably you should taper back a little bit on the meds then, I would think.
I guess. And I've gone from my glucose has gone from 100 to 102 down to usually in the middle 80s. So, and I really attribute to the TA65.
Oh, good. So the sleep was good. Are you both still dreaming, or
yeah,
not working out?
That's been continuing for me at least.
Well, I just started dreaming about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So, but I hadn't been dreaming for 5 or 6 years. So that's good.
Now on is Greg. I think this is Dr. Gregory Gerber in Hawaii. Greg, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Good. One of the questions I'd like to ask is your neuropathy, is it based on diabetes? I see that you're on metformin, so I'm assuming that's correct. Is that correct?
That's not correct. No, we have runs in our family. It's genetic, and my son's got it. I think my grandmother had it, and no, we're not diabetic. My blood count is 85. Glucose count is 85.
That's wonderful news.
I'll let you go, Bill.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it.
Righto. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.
So what did your doc say when I know he saw you about 3 months ago and then now recently. Yeah. What's his general assessment of you?
Well, he's a really great doctor, but he once again he looks at my labs, looks at my labs, and then gets into the deal that, hey, you're a different person than you were here 6 months ago. And what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm exercising, probably eating a little better, and so on. But he was astounded.
So he doesn't know anything is up.
He knows nothing.
And so he just, as a gestalt, or the numbers and the gestalt.
He says, when you came in here. Well, he actually said, when you came in here, you were a piece of garbage.
You pay this guy to treat you like that?
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, I felt pretty good when I come in. Well, everything has changed. You're better. You're totally healthy right now. You're
really?
As healthy as you can get.
Really?
I said, I'll accept that.
It's only been 6 months, so hopefully he'll be even more shocked at 12 months.
Good.
Yeah. And you see the same doc, right?
I see the same one, but he didn't do that. I mean,
well, that's awkward.
Yeah.
You know? Were you together at the same time?
Yeah. Keeps waiting.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. Anything more?
Funny.
Anything you can say, I can say softer.
I can say anything softer than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
I can drink my liquor faster than a flicker.
I can drink it quicker and get even sicker.
I can open any safe
Without being caught?
You bet.
That's what I thought, you crook.
Any note you can hold, I can hold longer.
I can hold any note longer than you.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. Yes, I